Hello, I'm television producer presenter Rob McKnight, and yes, I do love a bit of branding. In fact, we've got merch, which you can buy at mcknighttonight.redbubble.com. Is it too early for the plugs? With over 30 years' experience in the media industry, this is Media McKnight. Well, during season 13 of My Kitchen Rules on Channel 7, Anthony and Claudine, the Aussie battlers, featured very heavily. But even though they progressed through the series, their screen time was drastically reduced. That's because the pair were facing serious charges, including rape, torture, and sexual assault against two of their daughters. Now, despite hundreds of charges being levelled against them, Anthony was found not guilty, and Claudine's case is still progressing through the courts. According to the Brisbane Times, Magistrate Michael Quinn found there were several differences in the versions of events that were presented by complainants and witnesses before the court. Quinn said in parts of the claims, some of the evidence seriously undermined the credibility and reliability of the complainants. Anthony and his daughter Paige joined me on McKnight Tonight recently for an exclusive interview to talk about everything that's happened. Now, the allegations came as a shock to Anthony and Claudine, even though there had been a falling out between the family. Anthony was a stepdad to Claudine's 4 children. 2 of the children were making claims on a podcast and were sent a cease and desist letter from Channel 7's lawyers. Paige claims a DVO was placed on Anthony, Claudine and Paige in retaliation.
I was accused of assaulting her and causing a miscarriage 3 weeks later, and no evidence in court, not even a doctor's note to say that she was pregnant at the time of this alleged incident.
Wow.
So that was all very shocking for me and very, very hurtful. But
just the lies.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's an attack to my character and the work that I do. So moving forward with mum and dads, you have to supply evidence, obviously, when you're placing a DVO on someone. And because there was simply no evidence, my sisters went and placed 100 historic charges of child rape and torture, common assault, things that fall under that child
domestic
torture.
violence, yeah.
Now, just as My Kitchen Rules started airing, Anthony and Claudine were charged with multiple historical offences.
I was at work and I was told to come home because the police were there, and I said, what for? And then they wouldn't tell us. Then they took us to the watch house, still didn't tell us. And then once they fingerprinted me and let me go, that's when I found out what charges I was on. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Where did this come from?
It was a shock. It was a shock to us all.
Yeah.
At the time, this story spread through the media like wildfire, but there was a suppression order which protected the identity of everyone. As I said, the media knew, and details of the case, and because it involved contestants on a high-rating television show, lawyers pushed for the suppression order to be lifted. And when that suppression was lifted, the media played up the celebrity angle.
After almost 2 years of court protection and anonymity, tonight 9 News can reveal the identity of 2 Queensland contestants on a Channel 7 reality show facing child abuse charges. My Kitchen Rules contender Claudine Umakimu was charged with rape, entering a shock guilty plea to other charges, while her husband Anthony is also facing similar offences.
Yeah, everyone's been always saying, you know, it's the channel rivalry, it's the war between the channels. So, you know, what you see on TV, what do you actually believe? I don't believe in much these days after what I've just been through with allegations and the police just hounding us to try and find evidence. Like when I got charged after the allegations, the cops get 6 weeks to investigate. And because they found nothing on us, they slapped the same charges on us. So Claudine had 36, and then because they had no evidence, they couldn't find nothing. They slapped another 36 charges, which were exactly the same, just worded different. So then the cops got 6 weeks to investigate.
When Anthony was found not guilty, some websites did do a write-up, but Channel 9, which had gone big on the lifting of the suppression order and listing the charges, well, it doesn't appear to have reported Anthony's not guilty verdict.
It also causes trauma, depression, anxiety, you know, and my wife's going through all that right now, you know, but we've just all got to stick together and be strong as a family.
It's tough, isn't it? And I'm sure you've been through that as well, Anthony. Like when you're just in this whirlwind, and especially in that 9 News report we saw, the cameras are on you. You're being chased by a media scrum. It's certainly not something you're used to.
Well, I've also been asked not to come back on work sites because someone's recognised me from the cameras on the news.
So that's it. You're guilty.
Yeah. But how can you be guilty without any evidence?
Well, you were found not guilty.
Yeah. But shouldn't you
But
be...
it has an ongoing effect on your life.
Yeah.
That's right.
There's no assumed innocence, it seems, in this country anymore, and it's a real shame. And I think on the flip side, another polarizing truth is that so many true victims of these crimes are not coming out on top when they do go through the justice system, which is so sad, because, you know, we're dealing with false allegations that are just, there is no truth to it. But then there's true victims who bear the scars of these traumas that my sisters are parading in.
Look, there is a whole lot more to this story, and it is a fascinating interview. I'll leave a link in the description if you do want to go and watch. And I would say to anyone interested in the media and how the media reports on stories, how it follows up, and what the people go through who are the target of the media, it's well worth a watch. Pauline Hanson certainly made headlines last week when she addressed the National Press Club. Now, regarding the media sector, she made it clear she would defund the ABC and axe SBS altogether.
Rest assured, there will be big changes if One Nation is given the chance. The SBS will be gone. There's no need for it anymore. The internet has overtaken the need for it. The ABC will still exist, but in a very different form. Taxpayers will still fund some of the ABC's operations in regional, rural and remote areas where there is a lack of commercial media. But in the cities, which are already saturated with media outlets across the political spectrum, the ABC will only be subscription service only.
Now, of course, this made a lot of headlines, but there was certainly a lot that came out of that, including the protest that happened. I've been stewing on this for almost a week. The ABC, it's not as easy to just split it apart. So there will be problems with that. I am keen on regional areas still having their ABC, and I do think there's a place for the ABC in metropolitan markets. But there is a problem within the ABC. There is a problem of transparency, of ideology, and that is an ongoing issue. I recently had an FOI application in just to do with me. I wanted to know what was being said about my stories and myself and my reports. And let's just say there was a complete lack of transparency. I have another FOI application in at the moment to find out how there was a cover-up during one of my recent stories that I know for a fact the editorial stance was changed and the ABC misrepresented where they were up to in their planning stages. I'm not holding my breath. But when it comes to SBS, does Hanson have a point? When I think back to what the original goal of SBS was, I think about the fact that it was a way of integrating immigrants into our society, but also giving them a taste of home. They would see news from Greece, Italy, and all those different kinds of places. Well, is there a need for the SBS to do that anymore when you consider the fact that those services are available online, on the internet? I do start to think she's right that the internet has made SBS redundant. When I've spoken to people about this over the past week, they're like, there's great content on SBS, and there is. There is great content, but that's content that could be sourced by other places. Those companies doing content deals with SBS could do content deals with other people, with other platforms, with other companies. Do we really need SBS for The Handmaid's Tale? I think the SBS has certainly lost its original idea of what it was about. It was meant to be a service that catered to minorities, and integration. But all the services that it provides for those minorities is quite simply available anywhere. If I want to watch news from Greece, I can do that. If I want to watch a movie in Arabic, I just change the audio language on Netflix. So what exactly is SBS serving right now? Certainly not fulfilling its original mandate. Great entertainment channel. It's one of the best free-to-air platforms out there. The content on SBS is amazing. But that's not what it was originally for. There's been a lot of distress in the theatre community with news Beetlejuice the Musical has cancelled all Australian shows after playing its final Brisbane performance on July 5. The Michael Castle Group said the decision to cancel was made due to the rising costs of touring a large-scale production across the country. And it's certainly hard trying to sell tickets to musicals during a cost of living crisis, which is why star power is so important. Now, you might remember there was a huge outcry from the theatre community over the casting of Nat Bass and Rob Mills in the local production of Waitress. Some called it stunt casting, and there was a backlash against the commercialisation of that production. But it's still going strong and will soon head to Sydney after a successful completion of the Melbourne run. Theoretically, a Beetlejuice musical should have had a better chance of success because the brand is so much better well known. The Waitress musical is not, despite being a terrific show. Interestingly, I asked Nat Bass about the casting backlash recently on McKnight Tonight.
And yes, you do not necessarily need names to get things, working or across the board, but it definitely helps in a climate where people are struggling to, come up with the money to go and see something. It definitely helps bring an audience to the theatre and I'm all for that as well. But at the end of the day, they're not going to choose someone who can't do the role and who they don't think that will fit, because when you do stuff like this, I've been around a long time, it goes to America, it goes to every producer under the sun. There's probably about 20 people that have to sign off on who the cast is. And so when that backlash happened, I definitely took it on, but I thought, you know what, you're also you're not just bagging me, but you're bagging the creatives that made the choice. And I think, to be honest, a lot of people, it is hard to get a leg up in this industry too. So I do understand the take on it, but at the same time, I don't think people who were really feisty about it had understood that, yes, I've done a lot of commercial stuff, and in my career that I'm also a musical theatre performer and have been for a very long time.
Look, it's really simple. People in the theatre can't complain if big names are used to sell tickets. It is so tough out there. And if you want jobs, if you want there to be a theatre industry, stop whinging, stop moaning when someone like Nat Bass, who's had an extraordinary theatre career, gets picked to be the lead of a role. She gets people through the doors. So why complain about it? Otherwise, you're bound to end up with a fate like Beetlejuice, which, as far as I can tell, had no big names, or certainly no names that I recognised. And I'm just a pleb. So, if people like me aren't recognising the names and aren't drawn to it because there's no one we specifically want to see, well, then you've got problems and you end up with cancellations. So enjoy the people that get picked and give them the best opportunity of making the show successful. Think of the greater good. You can show your support for the show by buying me a coffee. Just go to buymeacoffee.com/McKnight Tonight. Every bit helps keep this show from our garage going. Here comes McKnight Tonight. With the resignation of Keir Starmer in the UK dominating headlines, a proposal that will affect how everyone watches television is apparently being snuck through. The Daily Mail is reporting that free-to-air television signals in the UK are set to be turned off as early as 2034, forcing consumers to move over to an internet-only mode. Critics say the move could hit millions of pensioners who still rely on digital terrestrial television and are calling for the move to be delayed until 2040. What's interesting about this is that anything the UK does in this realm will likely be followed in Australia. So if they're doing it in 2034, well, maybe it won't be until 2040, but it is coming. And what this means is that people would no longer be able to watch television through an aerial. they would have to use the catch-up services. And the government would rake in millions, possibly billions, from the spectrum that the free-to-air broadcasters are currently using, because that spectrum that they broadcast their signals through is very valuable in the age of technology. People, and when I say people, I mean telco companies, want that space because they want to deliver more products to consumers using that spectrum. So if the government can get the television networks off that spectrum as soon as possible, well, that would make them a lot of money. And then there's a second factor. What would that mean for Australia's anti-siphoning list? You see, I've been banging on about this for quite a while. And the fact that the federal government has not included the digital services, 7plus, 9 Now, 10 Play, iView, in the anti-siphoning list is a real cause for concern. Australia's anti-siphoning list dictates that Australian sports of significance and cultural significance must be played on free-to-air, or the free-to-airs must be given first priority. So what does that mean if we no longer have free-to-air television going through our aerials? Because the government has not protected those catch-up streaming services. That means there is no anti-siphoning list and there is no protection. And we're about to see that with Foxtel. So there's an interesting article talking about the fact that Foxtel is making a play for the sporting rights for the NRL. But it's not just making a play for the pay TV rights, it's making a play for the complete package with the idea of selling it off to the free-to-air broadcasters, specifically 7 and 10. Where this gets interesting is an article, I think it was in the AFR, suggests that this goes against the anti-siphoning list because it must be offered to free-to-air broadcasters first. The anti-siphoning list has never been tested. It's about to be. And this idea of closing down free-to-air TV, well, there's going to be a lot happening politically, and we're a few election cycles away from a real decision having to be made. But the fact that the UK are moving in on this, Australia won't be far behind. And speaking of Keir Starmer's resignation, gee, it's always fascinating watching press conferences before they actually happening. When I was working in newsrooms, I'd see the feeds all the time. But now, thanks to YouTube and live streaming, you can often see the tech checks going on, reporters talking, sound checks, all that kind of stuff live in the lead up to the speech. In the UK, a sound engineer by the name of Tobias Goff has become a bit of an internet sensation for his, well, they say, rugged good looks. As per this Instagram post by the Britspot, this guy keeps going viral every time a Prime Minister resigns in the UK. Known as the hot Podium guy, Tobias Goff first went viral when he set up the podium for Theresa May's resignation in 2019. He was then spotted before Boris Johnson's resignation speech in 2022 and went viral again for sound checking before Liz Truss's resignation. Hot Podium guy has now outlasted 5 PMs in 7 years after being spotted at Keir Starmer's resignation today. I love how this happens, how random people just become viral because we're now all watching what's going on. But if you love seeing behind the scenes of TV, have a look at this shot from APT that shows Starmer there in the middle. That's him giving his resignation speech. That's the media press pack on the right and his ministers on the left. And that was what he faced. He sort of feels all by himself because the shot we all saw was intimate. It was close up. But that's what he was talking to with all those people there when he gave his now historic resignation speech. Television. There's always more than meets the eye, and it's always because of the angles we choose. Never believe everything you see. You know, there are some great finds on YouTube for TV tragics like myself. Just yesterday, I came across one of the final episodes of The Don Lane Show with special guest Graham Kennedy. It is a fabulous watch and shows just how great Australian variety television used to be. Yes, it's a little cringy when Lane is singing the latest hit song to open the show, but there's plenty of laughs and Don often just takes the piss out of himself. It was a great watch. I want to watch more. We'll leave a link in the YouTube description, and if you want a real insight into television, here's my big tip for you. Just watch any interview with Jason Alexander. This guy is so honest. He'll tell you what he was earning. He'll tell you the intricacies of what happened on Seinfeld. He'll tell you about how he was having a go at Larry David because he wasn't in an episode. This guy is an open book. Every interview offers something. Search any interview with Jason Alexander. Trust me, you'll enjoy it. All right, that brings us to the end of this edition of Media McKnight. And don't forget, if you want some merch, you can get merch. Just go to McKnightTonight.redbubble.com. I'll even put some Media McKnight merch in there as well. I'll be back next Tuesday at 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. But don't forget, paid members get early access as soon as the episode is ready. I'm Rob McKnight. I hope to see you again very soon. Until then, it's good night from McKnight.